Okay, thank you a lot. Hello, everybody. There is a second day of our introductory to Python course. So we started doing recap when I forget to press the recording button, and we discussed shortly what we did yesterday. So the first thing we discussed is problem formulation and solving formulated problem, and what steps we need to perform to get our problem solved. And here is the link for Google Collaboratory, which allows us to create programs in Python and run them just using our browser. And here is the link, and I'm asking you to follow it to solve tasks that we're going to solve today. Okay, so the second thing that we touched is variables and literals. Again, we can declare a variable to store some informations in them and access this information and change it. And we're declaring variables by naming them. And then we use literals to initialize our variable. So we discussed the basic types of variables, which are strings, which are started with double quote and ended with double quotes, which have some, we discussed that they have some functions, some properties, and you can do some operation on them, like formatting, joining strings, and so on and so forth. Another property is integer, which holds whole numbers. The third one is floating point numbers that works for real numbers. And we also has Boolean data type, which takes only two values, which is true or false. And this Boolean variables is a result of relational operations, like here, operations of comparison. Okay. Then we learned how to read input and output and how to process this input and output. We are going to extend this concept of interacting with users to concept of interacting with files. Then we also touched relational operations and Boolean operations. Okay, this is short. Yeah, we also learned how to alternate the flow of our code depending on our results of our relational operators. We talked about if statement, and then we shortly discussed how to check correctness of our code by testing it with different setups, so with small trivial tasks, and check if it works correctly. Any questions about day one, about topics from day one? Okay, since there is no questions, let's continue or get familiarized with the syntaxes. So on day two, we have three main topics that we are going to cover. First is repeating code in loops that allows us to optimize some repetitive tasks, like working with files line by line or asking user for some input several times. Then we are starting get familiarized with other not basic data types, and the first one is list, which is a part of collection data type. And then we're going to discuss reading and writing files. So this is our plan for today, and let's get started. So first topic is repeating code in loops. Before we start discussing for loops, we need to discuss the concept of collections. And collection is a group of objects with a logical connection. For example, our basic data type string can work as a collection of characters. And we can even iterate using for loops through this collection. So what we basically are doing is we just use syntaxes for a for loop. Then we name, we create a variable that is going to accept every single element starting from the beginning till the end until the collection is finished. So first element of hello world is character H, and initially it will accept X, our X will accept the value of H, then E, then L. So let's try to print this X one by one. So, okay, so you see that we were able to print our word by characters. Okay, for loop can, for example, be used to get to implement some math. For example, if we want to get the sum of first 10 non-negative variables, we can use for loops. So here we create an element that is called a variable that is called sum, and initialize it with 0. Then we again use a for loop, then create some variables that is going to accept elements from the collection. And here we don't have a collection of elements from 0 to 10. So we need to create this one. And here's the function that is called range that serves to create a collection for us. So we need to put how many elements we are going to have in our collection. Then we can sum up all our x's from x from 0 to 11 and have a sum. And at the end, we can print the sum. Print sum. So this is going to give us some of the first 10 integers. Okay, so let's see what range is doing. So range is just a function that returns on something. So it do some work inside and give us, okay, I cannot show it straight away, so I need to use the list that we don't know yet, but I will explain you later what list is doing. However, it allows us to see what is inside the range. So when you see inside the range, we have some collection. Yeah, a collection of integers starting from 1, going to till 10. We have a question. Actually, does E in 10 means from 1 to 10? Okay, I think I answered your question because I just explained how the range is working. Yes, this is correct. It creates a collection of elements from 0 to 10. And why, and you see I put here 11 because range accept elements. So it's called, okay, we will discuss range a little bit later, okay? So, but actually it's called, there is a concept which is called inclusion exclusion when you create some collections. So the last element is not included into the collection, and it is connected with the fact that but by some reasons in Python, the first element is not the first, but 0th element. And so 11th element has index of 10. So this is a short history of that. Oh, okay. So what is plus equal mean? So I can rewrite it. So it's basically a syntax is sugar for this operation. So sum plus x, and then it assign it to back to the variable sum. Yeah, so it's going to have the same results. Okay. So since we started touching some functions, it is very important how to get information about these functions. So there is a lot of different functions, like 1,000 or even more functions that may be useful for some applications, and people cannot memorize all the nuances and details that functions can make, and therefore there is a requirement to document the function. And developers usually, if they want their functions to be widely used, they pay attention to the documentation. So there are several ways of exploring documentation. First one is to use help function inside the Python. I will show you later how to do that, but there are other alternatives. For example, you can Google, and basically it is any functions, and it's going to give you very relative results. Another option is to use Stack Overflow. This is web page. You can Google it, Stack Overflow. It will give you a web server that is this is a portal for asking and answering questions about programming. So, and there's a big community, and basically you can find answers to almost any questions that developers, beginners, or people who try to understand something new about some libraries. So all questions are, and almost all questions are well answered there. You can also use official documentations for Python, and it has documentation for every single function that is in standard Python. And learn how to use search engine, and including on web pages, you can use find tool. Just that helps you not to read the whole text, whole information, but something that you are interested in. So let's explore how helps is working. So I have a function help that is built into my Python, and I can explore what range is. Okay, so it gives me a lot of documentation that I can read. So here is your first exercise. Try to run help range and find step on the page and read about what the step mean and how to use that. So I will give you 3 minutes to try to navigate through the documentation. So, okay, let's just solve it. This problem. Okay, here is the question. Did you mention why the book is intended? Yeah, this is a good question. Basically, I didn't mention that. Yeah, and indeed. So in Python, there is a concept that intendentation matter. Why it's matter? Because basically it's not only for loops, but it also for if statements and other syntaxes. It's important for Python to separate where the block ends. So imagine we have not only one code, but not only one line of code in our program, but several lines. For example, I want to print out the sum, right? So, and now how to understand when the for loops ends its body. So where is the last line that is going to be repeated each time by the for loop. So, and for these purposes, we use intendentation. So check the difference here. You see, because I used intendentation incorrectly here, I print sum inside the for loop, because for thinks that print is inside its for body because I used intendentation. To stop, so even if I add another line, it is not going to help me, right? So because even if I remove intendentation here, so it still think that this print is the part of the loop. However, if I will remove this intendentation, for loop will understand that the body ends right after the first line, and it's not going to print each string anymore. Yep. Okay, so let's go over. Okay, another question. Okay, so here here our documentation for our range function, and it has, okay, this one doesn't have a lot of information, but the documentation can be very huge. And to find the information about step, I will just look through the web page for the keyword step. Okay, so, and it basically highlights me every single string where this step is where there is a mention about the step, right? So, and first thing that I can see is that I have two options to call range. One is with one parameter, where the parameter is only stop that I used, so I called range 11. And there is another option. I can define a start position, then stop. And then additionally, in square, you see there is a square bracket, so that means that this parameter is optional. I can also set a step. So let's go up to our example. So what I could do to be more precise, if I want to compute a sum for first 11 element, I had to start with 1 technically. So what it is going to give me the same result, but let's see how collection looks like now for range from 1 to 11. So you see our collection should start from 1. Yes, it starts from 1 and ends with this. So here is inclusion exclusion concept. So first element is included in the range and the last one is excluded. And if I add a step, I should have only odd numbers, okay? Because now we do not enumerate through every single element, but rather than in every other element. And if I want to have odd numbers, I can start, or even numbers, I can start with 2. Right? Okay, so that's it about documentation. No, the question is, can you do just stop step? No, you cannot do, because if you will do that, it will think that the first element is start and the second one is stop. So if you want to do just stop step, you need to set default start element here, which is 0. So now you go from 0 to 11th with step 2. Okay. Okay. Range stop. I don't know. I never tried this one. Maybe. Let's see. Let's try. I don't know. So actually, this is a good question. So guys, please look at the chat. There is a question: is it not possible to name arguments in Python function calls like range, stop equal 10 and step? So this is actually a good concept, and we indeed in Python sometimes for some functions have an option of naming arguments. I'm not sure if this concept is implemented in the range, and the only way the only way to check that is to try it for now. So let's just do that. Is it going to work? No, you see, this concept is not resolved in the range function. However, nobody prevented to redesign this function and make this concept working, but you need to know some knowledge about how to do that. Okay, the question is, why must sum equal to 0? So basically, the rule is the following. Actually, it's also a great question. The rule is the following: that before we start using the variables, we need to declare them. Okay, so let's assume that I will just remove this element from here, and actually I need to open a new Python window to demonstrate you what will happen. So I'm not explaining you why I should do that, but there is a reason. So let's start our code from the beginning. So we do not declare the variable sum, and what will happen? You see that the compiler will tell us that it doesn't know and actually sum is bad name, by the way, because it's a function. But what it basically says that it doesn't know the variable of name sum. So why sum is bad name? basically is that I forget that we have a function, sum, built-in function in Python, but why it worked here, it is because we can redefine, temporarily redefine the names in the Python, and we can say that sum is not a function anymore, and that is basically a variable, but it's also another concept. So I don't think you should worry about that at this moment. Okay, so, and yeah, why we need to initialize it to 0? It's because we need to set a type for this variable. So, and by setting it, by initializing it with integer literal, we say that the sum is going to be integer. Because remember that, for example, if I will use the string as a literal to initialize sum, and if I will run it, so it says that I cannot concatenate string to integer. So initialization is important. Okay, any other questions? Okay, then move on. So, and here's an example that shows that we can even have a negative step, right? But for these purposes, we need to set starting and ending position properly. And remember that stop is also exclusive here. So that's why if we want to have a range from 9 to 0 with in decreasing order, we need include 9 and stop at -1, because if we stop with 0, 0 will be excluded. And the interesting property of the collections is that you can access collection elements using indices and square brackets, right? So these square brackets, it's a little bit more general than just putting numbers here. However, here we are going to talk about numbers and use numbers as indices. So what we learned is that a string can be represented as a collection of characters, just like an array of characters. And this array starts indexing with 0th elements. It is not only in Python, it works in many other languages. And it's just, it has just a historical reasons why it's working this way. And of course, it has some good properties that we're not going to discuss here, but however, you just need to get used to it. So the first element is 0th element here. So, and if we're trying to access the 0th element from hello, it is going to be H. First element is the next element, which E. And in Python, you can even access the last element by using the minus sign. So if you want to access this exclamation mark or last element, you can print -1 in parentheses. You can also access the second element from the end, also by using minus. And you can use not only numbers, but also so-called ranges. So like range function, if we use semicolon inside the brackets, it also understands it as a range for the collection. And it works the same way. So it's also follows standard inclusive exclusive principle. So the first element is inclusive, which is E, and the last and minus second element, which is or, is excluded. Okay, and it is equal to 1 minus 4. So we can set it. We can use both ways for set the range, whether from the beginning when we use positive integer and from the end when we use negative integer. Okay, so you see that in both left column and middle column, we used literals to access the elements. But on the right column, we can use a variable to access the literals. So the same way, so we initialized x to our, we set the x to be a variable of type string with value hello. And that works pretty the same way like with literals. Okay. We can use this principle to print our hello by character by accessing elements by this index. So you see here that we can use, let's use variables initialize x to hello just for simplicity, just for convenience, and for e in range, and we need to iterate from the first element to the last element. So how many elements we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So for range 6, why use 6? Because the first element is going to be 0. So initially I is equal to 0, which is which will give us h, the 0th element, and last index is going to be 5, which is going to be this exclamation mark. And we can print the content of our variable just by element by using indexes. Okay, that works. So, but it is not very convenient to compute manually how many elements are in our collection. So we can use the function range that will do the work for us. So if we now we did it automatically, and this function range is going to give us always the correct number of range, correct range. Okay, so there is another function that is very useful, which is enumerate. So you see here that enumerate returns you both index and character. So sometimes it's convenient, not in this specific example, because we could like easily work with index because we know how to access element by using index. But sometimes it's really convenient to have character and to have element and its index in the same way. So and here enumerate returns you a collection of pairs. So basically it combines both principles. Remember that before we used for in different for character in X, which is going to give you characters. See, and accessing by index, so which can pretty do the same work. So now we use enumerate function. So let's try to see what is enumerate. It's enumerate of x. So you see it is, okay, I also need to do the list. So basically, enumerate returns as an object, and I need to convert this object to the list. And it's another powerful concept that we are not going to touch here. It's more for advanced stuff, but basically, if you're going to use a Python professionally, you need to understand what this object means. But I'm just telling you that it's important concept that we're not going just to tell you. And you see, after I converted enumerate list, indeed, it returns us a pair of elements. So, okay. So, and here's an exercise for you. Print word string hello in reverse order. So there is a reminder that you need to use range stop, start stop, and start is inclusive stop as we discussed. And the second task is triple LO in a user's phrase. So you need to invent some phrase. So use input for inputting for obtaining a user phrase, and make each O tripled in the output. So here is a code on the left side, which is a hint for you. So you just need to think how to slightly modify it. So first you can run it, then slightly modify it. And see, there is in print, I introduced you a new concept. So there is a name parameter, which is end, which allows you not to print like we printed here, because by default ending is a new line. But if I will add end to just, for example, minus, it is going to substitute the end. Okay, so here is minus, which ends every single print. Oh, and if I do it just empty string, it's going to print hello. Okay, take your time and work on the exercise. And basically, okay, let's work on exercise for 5 minutes, and we have a break for 10 minutes. There is a question. Oh yeah, there is a shortcut, so we can use replace. However, please don't do that. Yeah. Try to do it using the instrumentary that we discuss. Do you guys, do you have access to our workshop slides? Because I uploaded those slides there. So if you do have, because I don't know how to share links for the folders. It's basically, I mean, it's not my folder. Okay, I will share a link for my Google Drive. Okay, for my slides at Google Drive. Not this one. It's not this one. So there is a Google Drive where all materials are available, and I have uploaded slides there, the PDF version of slides there. So at least I have received an invitation to access this Google Drive. I assume it's also shared with you. And if you go to your Google Drive, you have a link shared with me where you can access this folder. So, okay, let's look through the example. So first we need to print word string using range. Okay, so here is our word hello, and we can use range that start with len hello -1 because it's inclusive. Then it's going to be -1 because stop is exclusive and step is -1. And just in print, we need to substitute n with an empty string. And here we have hello reversed. To substitute every single O with, I will use this string just to make it triple. So here we have this code. What we are going to do is just slightly modify it. So we don't even need enumerate, we don't need anything. So what we need to do is just go through our word and check, use if statement. So it's basically, I wanted you to just recap if from the yesterday. And so if x at index y is equal to O, what we need to do is just print triple with ending as an empty string. And if it's another symbol, we just print it. Okay. Oh, I forget about ending. Okay. Okay, so now we have a 10 minutes break, and after that, let's continue. Let's move on. Yeah, we started after the break, and I forgot to press the recording button. And what we just discussed is how to use nested loops. So it's a basic principle that inside for loop, we can use another for loop. And for example, we can print a multiplication table here. And now we're solving this exercise. So what we need to do, we need just to repeat this pattern with this pattern that is going to be printed on the display. Okay, let me try to help you solving this problem. So what we need user input in integer format. So we need to ask user to provide us some input. Okay. Then we have a rule that we have to print for each. So each we have the rule that we need to print rows such that in each row the number of elements were equal to the index of the row. So it's going to be integers. So let's do that. So for first outer loop, we need to create. So outer loop is going to be responsible for the printing rows. So it is, and there are going to be n rows, right? And inner loop is responsible for printing elements, for printing appropriate number of elements for each row. So, and E we use as in index, E index of the row we use as a number, as a required number of elements for our row. So we can usually just print it, j plus 1. Remember that we need to start printing elements from 1. And we need don't to forget about modifying the ending, which is equal to just empty string. And here we have a question. Why doing range instead of range n plus 1? Okay, I don't know, maybe we need range n plus 1. So we just need to test our program and see if we have any errors. Okay, then we printing and end of the line at the end of each row. So now let's try to debug our program. So let's put 5, like in our example. Yes, and indeed, we do not have the first row. Just actually, we have first row, but it is empty because we forget here that we should have one more elements. Because first index is going to be 0. So let's try to repeat. Oh, okay. Now it is printing correctly. Yeah. So you're right. We need range, but not n+1, but range e+1. Okay. So, and let's use our test case that we have on our slides. And indeed, for n = 3, we have the same pattern. So now the second exercise for you is to modify the code of printing tables to print it in this format. So for this exercise, we need to use if. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes for this exercise. So this exercise is basically combining two concepts about for loops and about if statements. So to solve this exercise, we need just to slightly modify the code for our multiplication table. So the code is very simple. We just need to go from range for I, and I remind you that I is responsible for number of rows. And we also need to print in each row, we need to print 10 elements. Okay, so the modifications here is the following. So we check if G is equal to 1, we do something, right? So what we're doing is we're printing some additional symbol at the end, right? So, but before printing that, we are going to print what we printed before. So we printed I times j, I times j with ending, which is equal to tab, our special character. But if j is equal to 1, we also need to print a vertical line. So it's print, then just vertical line and tab again. And the same is for E, but we need to add if statement in outer outer loop, right? So if E equal to 1, we just print this long horizontal line, and that's it. Otherwise, we print just empty line. Okay, let's see. Something went wrong because we didn't add, and here didn't add here, and we didn't add new line here. Yeah, now it's working. Or I can make it more beautiful just by doing something like times, let's say 190. Okay, something like that. Okay, here is some additional task for you that you can solve in your spare time, and I encourage you to do so. And the next topic is about indefinite loops. So there is another type of loops that may be useful sometime. Why it's called indefinite? I remember that for loop works with collections, and we know at the beginning what is going to be the size of the collection and how many iterations we can do. But in Python, there is a way to work to repeat the code until some condition is happening. And for these purposes, we can use a while loop. And here you see that while loop has so here's an example. So if you want to write elements from 10 to 5, we can do this, the following thing. So we can initialize element to 10, then in while loop, while, and it's going to implement its cycle until some until this this logical statement is true, which we can substitute by relational statement, for example, as E less than 5. So it's going to print something until the statement is true. And here we're going to print A, and at the end we need to reduce the E, otherwise it's going to work infinitely. So it's going to work while the statement is true, and this is why we need to use greater than 5 elements. Okay, so or we can in such manner we can indefinitely interact with our user. So basically here we're just repeating what user is saying until user entered an empty string. So why it's happening? It's because the empty string is treated as a false. Okay, so empty string, it can be converted. Evaluation. So Boolean value of empty string is false, and not only of empty string, but actually 0 is also equal to Boolean false, and integer 0 and floating point 0 is also equal to false. Everything that differ from empty string and 0 is going to be true. So you see, even very small floating point numbers, which is all effectively equal to 0, is going to be true. Okay. So here's your exercise. You need to count the total number of digits in integer number. You need to take input from user, and you need to use while loop and division operation to get quotient for controlling this loop. So you need to divide integer by 10 in a loop, and then just check when it's going to be less than 10. Okay, so try to implement this exercise, and I give you 5 minutes. So it is a little bit more trickier. Please try your best just to solve it. Okay. We have a question. Yes, but yeah, there is always a shortcut for easy exercises. However, please do not use shortcuts. So, okay, let me help you. Let's solve this exercise. So again, we need to get some input from user. Let's say we have some number which is equal to 1001. And what we need to do is just use a while loop. So while n is greater than 10, and the number of digits, we need another variable that keeps the number of digits. So let's assume that we need to have at least one digit. So, and that our number is integer. So there are two assumptions. And while n greater than 0, we assign n to n divided by 10, and we need actually a numeric division, and after that we just add digit plus equal 1, or okay, you know that plus equal 1 means that we're just adding something to the variable. And at the end, we're just printing print digits. Okay. So let's try digits. It says that we have 3 digits while we have 4. So then we need to debug it. So for the trivial case, we have 1. So what we have for 10? For 10, oh, okay, great. So it's going to be greater than 9, I guess. Let's check. 10 has 2, and what is going to be? Oh, now it works correctly. So, so you see that mistakes are happen, and that every single line of code has to be tested, and that's why we discussed already test cases and unit testing. Okay, so let's move on. So there are two important keywords that can whether interrupt for and while loops or skip some steps. So the break command serves for premature exit from the loop. So here's an example. Suppose we want to stop on some iteration. So in our for loop over 1000 elements in the collection, and we can just check inside the if statement if it's time to break or not. And you see, so to control how this code is working, we're printing the current iteration each time. And you see that indeed break stopped the implementation or the execution of the code. So the same can work. Another word is continue. What is continue doing? It can just stop the certain skip some iterations in the cycle. For example, here's the string hello world, and we check if C is equal to E or O, and if it's the case, we just skip this iteration and continue. Otherwise, we print the symbol. As a result, we printed the word without vowels, okay? Because there are only two vowels, word which is E and O, and we skipped the iterations when we had to print it. Okay. Here's two. So remember that we had the first program when we interacted with the user, right? So we ask him to type something, and if he typed something, we printed it. Otherwise, we stopped. So in this example, we had to initialize this variable and check this variable every time. Another way and more standard way to work with such problems when we don't know how many iterations we are going to implement, and if we have some case when we know that we are going to break the implementation of the code, it is better to work with infinite loops. So you see here, there is statement while true. That means that this indefinite loop is going to work forever. However, we have a break statement inside that, so it is going to break at some point. Okay, so when a certain condition is true. So here we have we also interacting with user in infinite loops, and when condition happens, that when a user didn't input anything, we just break our infinite loop. Okay, and here's your exercise. Complete the following code to print the numbers in a range using continue and break. So ask user to set the range using variables start and stop. Okay, so you need to ask user for start and for stop, and without using parameters in range, you just need to modify this code slightly, and your code should print all integers in the range. So, oh, no, okay, there is no questions, and let's just do that. Let's just accomplish the task. So let's say that our user gave us numbers 5 and stop is equal to 11. So we have a for loop which is going from 0 to 1000. And what we are doing, we just need two if statements. So if e less than start, we just need do nothing. So we just print continue. So we're skipping these steps. So if our e is greater or equal than stop, because our stop isn't exclusive, then we just break the cycle because we don't need it anymore. Let's see how it works. Oh, and we didn't print anything. Print I. Okay, let's see what is going to happen. Yeah, so our code worked. Okay. So here's your additional task for indefinite loop that I encourage you to solve at your spare time. Okay, so far we were discussing about how to iterate through the collection, but we never discussed what collection can be. And the first type of the collection and the most easiest one, the most basic one is list. And list is one of the data types that can collect massives of data. For example, a list is capable to store average highest temperature in Westwood, okay, but by the months. Or it can keep your favorite foods. So what is basically is here, so we have elements. So how to how to declare a list? We need to use square brackets and put elements, or using separator, which is comma, to put elements inside it. So, and elements has indexes started from 0, which is corresponding to the first element, and then it increased by 1 to the end. Okay, so like we saw it in when we work with strings and try to print them by character. So a list in Python can collect more than one data type at the same place. For example, it can keep both Westwood temperature and favorite fruits at the same time. It doesn't make any sense, however, in Python it is possible. And you can use plus operator like you used to concatenate the string. You can use this operator to concatenate your lists, you see? So we just concatenated Westwood temperatures and favorite fruits, and we get a new collection, a new list. Okay. List can be, so it's very similar to the string. So list can be multiplied by integer. What you're basically doing by multiplying, you just copying, you just concatenate the same list to itself the number of times. Okay. Like you can determine the length of string, you can also determine the length of your list. Yeah. You can iterate through the elements of the list like you iterated through the characters of your of strings. So you see here, you can substitute your list into after the in keyword, and it is going to iterate one by one from the beginning to the end through the whole list. Okay. List can be tested for existence of element in it. So you can test if there is 3 in the element in the list, and it returns true because we have a list of 1, 2, 3, and 3 is inside, so it's true. But we don't have 4, and that's why 4 is not in the list, and it's equal to false. Okay. So you like in like with strings, you can access elements of the list by using index. And like in the list, index is shifted. So the first element is actually has index 0, and the second element is actually the third in the list. Okay. You can also iterate from the end of the list. So here you get second from the left. So the first one, this is second, -4. And you can use slices, right? Or to get slices work like ranges with start and stop. Okay. If your inner element is string, you can even access the character of the strings by using outer accession. So here's example. Numbers 2, which is equal to 3, is a string, and we can access the element with index 3 from the string. You can also use slices here. So everything is worked for inner elements as it worked for outer elements. Okay. So, and you can list can even keep arrays as internal elements, then can be also accessed by inner index. Right? So, and basically, you can infinitely access element inside your list if you have list of lists and if you have strings inside that. So, and here is some example. So, for example, second element is a list in bar, and zeroth element is a string, and second element of the string is so. Okay, so you can add elements to the list by using append operator. So here you have a list of 3 elements. You can append an element to this list. So for example, if you want to append at 0 to the end, you can just use this append operation. Here's your exercise. Print an integer in a binary format. So you need to ask user to enter an integer, and your output, you need to print integer in binary format. And here is the hint. Here is a hint. So basically, this is a modification of your code when you determined the number of digits in your integer, right? And here is a pseudocode. So it's a description of the algorithm that you need to encode. Okay, so I give you, it's written 10 minutes. Okay, let's try to do it for 5 minutes to finish this code. So basically we have to have a break right now and see you at 3:40. And if you have questions, please ask them now. Okay, see you after the break. So basically, let's find a solution for this exercise. Basically, it involves a lot of concepts that we have already known during the first and the second day. So our input is integer, and we need to print it in binary format. How to do that? So first of all, we need to know how to write elements in the binary format. And I have given you an algorithm that you just need to code just by applying your knowledge. So suppose we have a number, let's say the same number, which is 1001. So we a priori don't know how many elements are there. So basically we can work in infinite loop and then just check the condition when we don't need more elements. We also need to have some array to store our answer. Okay, and we are going to append elements there one by one, and these elements will be the partial answer for our solution. So what is that? So first of all, so on each iteration, we need to divide our number by 2 and remember the quotient and the remainder. So when we divide element by 2, a remainder is going to go directly to our answer. So answer dot append and divided by 2. Okay. Then n we need to divide n numerically by 2. So because we are interested only of the whole part. And actually we don't need while true, we can see that while n, so when n is equal to 0, we just stop our iteration. So, and after that, we need to print our elements in reversed order. So for e in range -1 len ends no, first element is len ends +1 -1, and we step -1, and it's going to be print ends e, and ending is going to be just empty string. So let's test it. So smallest test case is going to be 0. Okay, and I see that this loop is not going to print it, so we have to have an additional case of if not ends. It's actually if len ends equal to 0, we just print 0. Okay, let's check. So what does it like? It's from len else, yeah, this way. If it should, it's always include zeros element. So yeah, it's going to be else. Okay, something like that. Okay. Okay, it's printed 0. Let's check with 1. Something wrong with our okay. Something wrong with our printing. Let's just so there is an error somewhere here. So we just need to check if we have correct answer. Print answer here. Okay. Answer is correct. However, it is printed incorrectly. So something wrong with my ranges. So it's inclusive. Lens, we need len ends -1. Oh, okay, now it works. Okay, it was simple. 1 in binary format is 1. What about 2? Okay, it works fine. What about 3? What about 4? So it seems like it's working. So let's go to our original number and see what its binary form. Okay. So here is a solution for our question. Yeah. Any questions? Okay. Let's go forward and compare what else is common in distance strings. So unfortunately, so the difference between distance string is that strings are immutable. So you cannot change elements inside the string. However, inside array, you can modify elements. So, for example, and therefore to modify the string, you need to convert first your string to the list using the list command. So you see after this conversion, your string is going to be not in string format, but in format of the list. And after that, you can modify the elements in the string, and then you need to convert list back to the string. However, if you convert list by the command that you used before, which is str. So it's going to save your string in a weird format. So, and here, remember that we had a function that was called join, that is a function of string. And what we can do, we can use this join to create a new string by using our array. So what it's basically doing, so for example, let me demonstrate it here. So we have some string which is equal to hello, and I'm creating an array which is list of s. So let's see what is my a. So it's an array, and I can use now this array to create string. For example, if I want my elements to be separated by dash, I print dash dot join and my array. If I want just my string back, I can just join elements of my array by empty strings. Okay. Next. Basically, we have in Python there is a concept that is called class. So basically, every object is belong to some type of class. And here we already learned about strings. So we know that different strings have the same methods that can be used. And there are integers, there are booleans, and all of them are also object of appropriate type. And to explore what functions each class have or each data type have, we can use a dir function. So here, for example, we have an empty string, and we can dir or look into methods that this string have. And so you can see here that there is a lot of functions that we can use for this string. You can even find a join here that we just used. So let's try to find it. Join. So you see there is function join. What other functions we used? We're also familiar with format function, and there are other functions that you can explore, and included some functions that start with this double underscore. So it is some kind of special functions that are responsible for certain behavior. So I would say that they are special internal functions that you may interesting to explore in your advanced course. So, okay. So after we have explored the functions that we have, we can take a help to see what these functions are doing. For example, dir. So using dir, we have found some functions that we're going to explore. And now we are going to use help to explore what this function is doing. So let's explore join function. And indeed, there is a help for our join function. There is help for our format function. And for any other function. Okay. Okay. So here's an exercise for you. Try to find what methods list have and read about sort and reverse function. So you need to use dir and help function. Okay. So first, we need to find what functions does our list have. So to explore the list, we can use an empty list, which is just closed, opened and closed square bracket. So, and it allows to look us through all the functions that we have here. So what we need to read about sort and reverse, you see here is two functions that we're interested in, which is reverse and sort. So let's just try to find a help about these functions. Help dot sort. So okay. So here's our help, and we can figure, and we now know that arrays can be sorted. And there is also reverse function that basically just reverse the arrays of the first and then became the last, the second from the end, and so on and so forth. Okay. Here is your task for the list that I encourage you to solve. And the last topic, we are moving to reading and writing files. So you can open files on your file system for reading and writing. And Python can open many file formats, including archives, by using appropriate libraries. Here we're only talking about plain text files. Reading and writing from and to files is similar to interacting with users like we did before via keyboard and display. The only difference is that instead of asking our user for input next line, we just read files line by line. Reading and what helps, what useful functions, so basically reading and writing files allows you to automatic parsing, analyzing, and creating reports in text format. So basically, if you run some tool and this tool gives you some results or some logs and everything. So by reading and writing into files, you can just automatically make some analysis like you did in Unix, like you do in Unix when you are using Bash. Right? The same thing you can do inside the Python. So basically, Python is a good substitute for Bash scripting. Yeah. To open file, we have a function that's called open. So these functions open a file by name. So the first argument is its name, and the second argument is how we're going to open this file. So we can open files for reading, for writing, for appending, and for many stuff. So here I use a keyword with. So basically, what it is doing, it works the following way. So it opens the file at this line, the first line where this is declared, and create a variable fout here, and then when you open the file, you can use it, you can write it, and after, and you see there is an indentation here, so that Python understands that all these writings, all these strings of lines are inside this with function. So when indentation stopped, what this with is doing, it destroys this variable and basically it closes the file. So as you probably know from the Unix systems, that you cannot leave files open in the system, you need to close them. So, and the with command allows you to do that automatically. So, and once you have opened the file for reading, so if you do not specify the second parameter, it's when you open the file, it automatically understands that this file is open for reading. So here we open the file for reading, and our file is connected to the variable fin after the first line, and then we can use the file. We can use for loop to print our file line by line. Okay. So here we have written the file, and here we're reading from the file. So let me show it in our terminal. So let's open our file. So here is the system. Basically, guys, this is a Linux system. So I can show you that this is Linux by implementing Linux commands that you learned from your Unix course. So for example, you know the ls command, and inside the Python notebook, I can put exclamation mark at the beginning that indicates that I'm going to run so-called magic. It's a term for this exclamation mark. And in magic mode, it works more like a bash. So you see, I can list my directory. I can also show you that we are working in some directory by using pvd that you know from the Linux command, and I can list a home directory here. Yeah. So I hope that I proved to you that we are working inside the Linux system. So and since we're working inside the Linux system, we can create files there. So let's create a file with open my file.txt, and to create a file we need to work in writing format. We need to set that we're going to write there. So let's call it fout, and now we can write everything we want to our fout, like we did with printing, right? When we were printing to our terminal. So fout.write, and it's like first line fout.write second line. So okay. Yeah. Now we can check if we have this file. So I'm again using my magic command, and you see in my current folder I have my text file. Okay, I can even cat that. So cat my file, and you see the problem. So when I catted my file, and it printed everything in one line. Okay, maybe it's a bug of the system. Let's try to open our file for reading and read it line by line. My file txt as f, and for line in f, just print line. Yeah. No, indeed, by some reason it concatenated my line. So the difference between print and write, printing to the display and writing to the file, is that when you print, by default it adds the end of the line. Right? But when you write to the file, you have to take care of your ending of the lines of your own. So you need to add ending of the lines after you finish your line. So let's see. So now we have rewritten our file. So let's try to cat it. My file. Oh, indeed, now it has 2 lines. So let's try to read it in Python. Oh, it has 2 lines. But you see here that because these lines now has ending of the lines, and print also add ending of the lines, now we have not 2 strings, but instead 4 strings. Okay? So we can fix it 2 ways. So whether we need to add end to just an empty string, and now it works. However, it is treated as a shortcut, because basically when we work with lines, we do not care about ending of the lines and any indentions, so on and so forth. So what is better? It is better to make our string clean, and to make our string clean, we can use the commands that we learned on the first day, which is called strip. So it just removed white spaces from the ending and from the beginning of the string. And after that, we can use print as we used before, and it's also print our lines in the correct format. Okay. So we discussed everything. So I wanted to work on this exercise. So it's basically the last exercise that we in class we work together. But in Zoom, it is kind of difficult because I don't know how to interact with audience, and maybe we already lose somebody or somebody. So I don't know. For now, I propose. So what I have for the end of the day. So it's basically exercise and some additional tasks. So I encourage you to do them, and by the end of today, before starting of our third day. And I would propose you for the last 10 to 20 minutes just to try to solve this task together. So basically there is a concept. So the task of this exercise is to write a Pascal triangle for depth n into the file, then print it on the display from the file. So to repeat what I just did, but in a little bit, but with some meaningful task inside that. So, and what is Pascal triangle? So it's an easy way to compute coefficient and binomial theorem. So here is binomial theorem. So that says that x plus y in power of n can be decomposed or can be represented as a polynomial with coefficients a0, a1, a2, a3. So basically, there is a good representation here. So we know that a plus b squared is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. And basically 1, 2, and 1 are coefficient of binomial theorem. So for when we add a plus b cubed, so we can represent it as a picture. So there is several components: red, yellow, green, and blue, and each of them can be met when we decompose this cube into parts. So the red cube has coefficient 1 because we have only one part in this cube. And this yellow and green, we can meet them 3 times in our cube, so they have coefficient 3. And the third coefficient, a fourth coefficient, has index of 1. And what is interesting here is that we can determine these coefficients for any n if we use a Pascal triangle. Okay, so here is a Pascal triangle, and each it has n layers, and the elements for the next layer can be determined from the elements of previous layer. So what you need to do, so assume that we have computed already 4 layers for these triangles. And to compute the next layer, we need to start from the beginning and add two components from the previous layer that is adjacent to current cell. So for example, for 1, there is only one cell adjacent, which is 1. And for the second element, there are 2 elements adjacent, 1 and 3. So the value of the second cell is 4. For the third cell, the value is equal 3 plus 3. For the fourth element, the sum of adjacent elements is 3 and 1, which is 4. As for fifth element, we have only one adjacent element, which is 1. So we need to write a program to solve this task. And here is the algorithm to write it. So, and we have 15 minutes. So let's try to solve this task. And for the next 15 minutes, I'm here to help you if you have any questions. And basically, we can solve it in a class together, maybe by sharing some ideas or discussing where you stuck. In class, it was useful because it was easier to organize the collective work, but let's try to do it via Zoom. And for you guys, I understand that it can be not very easy task, but try to solve it from the beginning and ask the questions when you stuck, okay? So let's try do that now. So try to solve it, start with something and ask question if you think that it's simple, but you don't know how to proceed. Just ask a question at that specific moment. Okay. So the first question. Does output need to? No. In out, let's use the format of triangles like we used before. So it shouldn't be in the middle. Instead, it should be just a first element in the row. Okay, this is a good question. Any other questions? Okay, so let's try to go through the hints. So the hint number 1, you need to decompose the problem. Okay. So you need to set some n to some value, for example, to 2, some simple task. Remember about unit tests, and that to create a unit test, we need to have some very simple problem. And the simplest one, I think, is the 102. So we need to write triangle for n102, and only after that, you need to move to 3 and 4 and test them. Okay, and to test how you write your triangles, you don't need to write it directly to the file. First, try to write the triangle on your display. Okay, and only after solving the first part, try start to work in these files when you are sure that you write your triangles correctly. And here's when you're ready, when you can write to the files. So you can enhance your program with additional properties. So you need to read n from user's input. Okay. Then you need to create a list with a single element on the first row, call it last row, and it is going to be 1. So, and then in a for loop, in an inner for loop, build next row based on the last row. So the idea is the following. So each time you are trying to build next row, you always need a previous one, right? So, and the previous one you need to save. So, and how to save that, you need to have a variable that is responsible, that is always responsible for the last row. Okay. And once you computed the next row, you need to reassign this next row to last row. Okay, because for the after you completed the next row, after you completed the row, you can treat it as the last row for your next row. Okay, and after that, you can you can add the rows that you just computed to your file or to the display. Okay, so try to implement all these steps for your triangle algorithm, and I'm here for 10 more minutes to answer your questions.